Good morning, Eugene. How are you?
I'm great, Jana. How are you today?
I'm great. Kids are back to school, so I hope everyone listening, I hope your kids have a great first week back or first day back at school. We have a lot to cover today. We are doing a back to school refresher. Summer has been long and everyone's mind is as it should be in holiday mode. But today we are going to, on this podcast, do a back to school refresher to remind parents and teachers of where we are in the school journey, what's been happening for primary school, junior cycle, and senior cycle. For those who haven't tuned in before, I'm Jana London, founder of the Natural Women's Council, and Eugene Garvin is a retired director of an engineering firm and does much of the research for the Natural Women's Council, Lawyers for Justice Ireland, Parents' Rights Alliance, and Irish Education Alliance, the groups that we work with. So, Eugene, I'll turn it over to you to kick off the back to school refresher.
Yeah, thanks, Jana. So this is, as I say, really a refresher. We would have covered a lot of this material in detail in some of our podcasts last year, but we're kind of bring you up to date and kind of set the scene for what's coming up as well. So it's kind of look in the past and then start looking to the future.
Mhm.
So we're going to cover things like some of the concerns over the current curriculum, what's actually happening right now in the junior cycle in particular. And we've also got some concerns over the primary curriculum, the draft primary curriculum. We'll talk a little bit about those. The first set of bullet points I want to talk about, I guess, is the concerns that we have. First one was the subversion of parental visibility and influence. We've definitely seen this, basically ignoring or downplaying the consultation feedback into the curriculum, and we just don't feel that the parental voice has been heard, or it's not even been recognized in many cases. The books are staying at school now, which is great. The books are being paid for, but parents never get to see them, and that's becoming an issue. And then associated with that is this whole notion of class contracts and secrecy pacts, which a lot of parents aren't even aware of, which means things that get discussed in the classroom, which mightn't even be in the school books, stay in the classroom. You never get to hear about them.
The one thing that most parents teach their children from a young age is you never keep secrets from your parents. Your mother and father are two people that you don't keep secrets from. And if anybody asks you to keep a secret, you say, no, there are no secrets. So the fact that school is telling children to keep secrets, that's a huge red flag for any parent.
People say, oh, this isn't happening, etc. Well, we actually have correspondence from EJA, the teacher training people, telling us this is happening and justifying it. We can quote you from EJA in their teacher
Mhm.
training. They support this, and it's a
Yeah.
concern. And then the last kind of the sub bullet I think from this area is this whole school approach, covering things across the curricular. So what happens in SPHE is now permeating into other subjects, and they're bringing in aspects of queer theory, racial justice, climate, and other social justice type issues being brought into other aspects of the curriculum. We can see this in the draft primary curriculum as well. It's even worse there than it is in the junior cycle.
They've done this in a very sinister way because they knew that thousands of parents were opting out to this particular topic. So they thought, well, that's great. You can opt out of this subject or this, but we're going to put it in all of the subjects so you cannot avoid it. We will indoctrinate your children.
On the issue of relationship and sex education in schools, some of you may know that the LGBT plus group Schools Out in the UK has produced a website called theclassroom.org.uk, which has downloadable lessons which teachers can use to integrate LGBT issues into every subject. So they're not marginalised, they're integrated in mathematics, geography and so on. And so it's really a resource that teachers all over the world can use. Second point was about, in the UK, the government is still saying that the parents of kids should have the right to withdraw them from relationship and sex education. We're not going to win that one to stop that. But what I'm proposing, my foundation is proposing, is that yes, the parental opt-out should remain, but parents should be required to come to the school and take their child out of each individual lesson. And of all places, two schools in the north of Ireland trialled this about 5 or 6 years ago before they got stopped. But they found the level of parental opt-out dropped to almost zero.
The other kind of main points, the over-sexualization and hedonization of children, sex is for pleasure, exposing children to inappropriate adult kinks and fetishes, and notion of underage consent. It's presented in a way of, you need to understand what consent is, etc. But they're doing it with 12-year-olds, and they're discussing it in a way that kind of implies that people underage together could consent to something. So reading between the lines, this is what they're doing. And then there's this grossly inappropriate material in the school libraries. We'll talk about that one. And then this whole teaching of radical, child harmful and contested postmodern ideologies. These are ideologies that basically seek to problematize everything in the young child's world, their whole notion of sex and gender, race and racial tolerance, their sense of identity as at a national level or as a European, and just their sense of security in terms of climate and sustainability. And it's kind of taking the floor from under children, which destabilizes a child. It traumatizes a child, particularly at the younger age groups. Yeah, you can have some of these discussions at the senior cycle, absolutely fine. But 12-year-olds, no. And it's in the primary curriculum as well. That's the real concern.
Yeah.
This stuff's going to hit kids at the age of 5 and 6. When you look at the primary curriculum, that subject matter is actually targeted for that age group. So,
and if we think Ireland has a mental health crisis now with the amount of children suffering anxiety, depression, particularly after all the lockdowns and those COVID measures, mental health is on the floor. We have to think about fast forward. And if kids are traumatized with hearing information that is not age appropriate, information that is false, information that makes them question reality, what will mental health in this country look like in a few years' time?
Yeah, no, that's the problem. So this stuff is an issue. And then there's a general degradation of scholarship. We'll refer to this a little bit later on. You've actually eliminated subjects because you want to cover extra time for SPHE and the CSPE curriculums. And as a result, you've taken away the options to do other subjects like science, for example. And then you're also bringing in these other themes of racial justice, etc., and you're bringing them into other subjects. You're actually diluting the subjects, and you're reducing some of the choice of subjects that you can do. And this is only getting worse. This isn't new. There's templates for this in other countries. We've seen this happen in the US, for example. There's nothing new here. But the issue is it's destroyed their education system.
And Lisa on the Natural Women's Council was one of the first to flag to us that some of the core subjects like science, geography, business studies, home economics, and certain arts and music was moved from the core into optional, and that her daughter and other girls in the class were having to fight to get science education, because now they're replacing it with hundreds of hours of this well-being, holistic, diversity, equity, inclusion nonsense.
Well, let's call it out for what it is. It's social engineering.
Yeah.
SPHE and CSPE are subjects for social engineering and indoctrination. When you look at the substance and the content, that's what they're trying to do. The other issue is that there's the content that you see in the curriculum and what you see in the books on the page. There's also the way of teaching that content. This is where the secrecy pacts come in. And they're using these critical pedagogical approaches. Now, this is not critical thinking. This is a Marxist critical way of looking at things in terms of you look for sources of oppression and victimhood. And that's the way they want to teach things. And you have things, postmodern concepts like systemic oppression from a race perspective, moral relativism, and subjective truth. These are postmodern concepts. They've no place in the education system, in all honesty. They really don't. This is outrageous that this stuff is brought into our schools, but it is being brought in, and it degrades scholarship. So we do have a video. It's only 2 minutes long. We have a YouTube video from last year, 10 reasons to be concerned about SPHE. Just watch it, and I think most people will be concerned.
And this would be a really good video, Eugene, for every listener today to send to their school group, send to their school WhatsApp, send to their school. I sent it to my school teachers, send it to everyone you know. It's only 2 to 3 minutes. It's factual. It has pages from the books. It has more facts. It doesn't have our commentary or opinions. So it might help reach that middle Ireland who still doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in denial, and it's the actual books that are in that, including the library books. And it also raises the issue of the secrecy pacts and the fact that the books stay in school. So I think one of the main areas of concern for a lot of people is the whole notion of gender theory being taught in the classroom. And it is being taught in the classroom. So this, again, is a page from the book. It's taught. It's actually queer theory. Nobody uses the term queer theory. People probably don't even know what queer theory is. But part of queer theory is the notion of a self-constructed, socially constructed gender that you self-declare and then you have this misalignment, you're born in the wrong body, this whole notion of all these things. These come from feminist theory and they've been adopted by queer theory. And then the whole notion of heteronormativity and the fact that that's an oppressive construct. And hence you have to kind of chip away at that, and the whole notion of childhood innocence, the notion of family, marriage, and any normative view of sexuality and sexual practice. You have to break all of that down.
You know, if you're a 70s or 80s child like myself, people relate the word queer to gay. It has nothing to do with gay, nothing to do with homosexuality. In fact, gay and homosexuality would be considered norm. Queer theory even goes against that. It takes it to the level of you are in the wrong body. Anything norm is not appropriate. So just to let listeners know, queer has nothing to do with the sexual preference.
Yeah, it isn't. And it's by definition, it isn't actually. In the books, it defines itself as not being based on sexual orientation or your gender or anything like that. Queer is a political position. It's political. And it's political in the context of sex and gender, but it is a political position, so people should understand that. So we do have material we've covered on that, and we'll talk about it again. So things like the pronoun and gender neutral language has been enforced. The teacher training group EJA are basically tell the teachers to enforce it. It's important to emphasize that, I think, Jana, for people, that we work with teachers every day. So we see exactly what's happening in the curriculum. We see all the material that comes through to those teachers.
We have hundreds of teachers in our network as part of the Irish Education Alliance. Teachers and principals form this Irish Education Alliance. So these are teachers who see the information even before parents. So we are in the know with this and get the information out to the public in a factual, evidence-based way.
Yeah. Social transitioning. Unfortunately, right now, things like the CAST report don't seem to be having an impact. And I'll allude to that in a minute. And this whole new notion of gender neutral toilets. And again, parents will have concerns over that, and rightfully so. And again, talking about this not acknowledging the CAST report, well, the sort of education that's taught in Irish schools doesn't talk about the condition of gender dysphoria or what might lead to a child having, gender confusion. Actually, and there's multiple reasons why a child can express gender confusion. Multiple reasons. Do need to be evaluated psychologically. There's no discussion about that. There's no discussion about desistance. There's no discussion about detransitioning. So they're getting half the truth. And it's not even half it's half of a non-truth. But these things aren't discussed at all. These things don't exist in the books. They don't exist anywhere in the HSE material. You're only getting one side of the story. And that really, again, should be a cause for concern. This is what I would call disinformation.
A comment on the gender neutral toilets. I was in the gym recently with my swimming lessons with the children, and there were a few teenage girls in the changing room, and I overheard them talking about the fact that they don't like boys using their toilets. So of course I had to jump in and have a conversation with these teenagers, and they said it's absolutely awful being a teenage girl, 13, 14, particularly when they're dealing with their change in their bodies and their menstrual cycles, having to go into a toilet where they deserve their privacy. And boys are going in, and some boys, being mischievous, are sticking their heads under the cubicles or banging on doors or, acting as teenage rebellious boys and hormonal boys do. But it's so unfair and so unsafe for those girls. Yes. We heard another parent contacted us to say that their daughter was getting urinary tract infections and kidney infections because she did not go to the toilet all day in school. Right. She held it to avoid the embarrassment of sharing a toilet with a boy.
So these are just the side effects, I guess. And again, you won't see these covered in the mainstream media. No, nobody will talk about these issues in the mainstream media. So the books, the library books, we alluded to this earlier on, they're described as LGBTQI inclusive books. But the issue is they're totally inappropriate. They're not appropriate for an LGBTQI 12-year-old, no more than any 12-year-old. So don't give me the inclusive message. It's nonsense. They're totally inappropriate. They're talking to 12-year-olds about going on Grindr. Grindr's an adult dating site. It's not appropriate. So don't be talking about inclusiveness with these books.
Let's talk about child safety. Do you, as parents listening today, want your child to upload a picture to a dating sex app to work out their location so they can meet the nearest adult in their area? Sorry, that's a pedophile groomer playbook. Let's call it like it is.
We will revisit this again, this topic. So we did have a number of parents harass public employees in libraries, which was unfortunate and shouldn't have happened. Not the way to do it. They were parents, and they've been labeled as, part of a far right activist group or something. They're just parents who lost the head. Like, let's be honest, they lost the head.
For our listeners who may have seen us be slandered in the media being far right violent thugs, our campaign was go in peacefully, look for the book, serve a notice letter, and walk out and send an email. We did not condone violence or encourage violence, but parents lost the head. They're angry. People have a right to be angry. Their kids are being groomed and sexualized.
One of the issues we found with some of the libraries is they reclassified the age groups so that the children would still be exposed to these books.
That's right. That's right. They moved the books to the adult shelves, which is what we asked for. But then they very sneakily, Libraries Ireland reclassified in some local libraries the library card to say that your child who's age 13 is a young adult, and a young adult can access the adult section. And, there's a reason why movies are rated cinema, PG, X or whatever. You don't let children watch X movies. So how can a child access the adult book section? It's absolutely sinister.
The story time for the Irish Mammy. So that does go through some of these books and reads from them for a couple of minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And we will cover this again in another video as well. We'll go into it a little bit more detail. And there is a video, an expose video, which you did, Jana, with Linda, and that goes through this in a lot of detail and all the people you engaged. And I guess the issue is people like the Children's Ombudsman, TUSLA, the Gardaí, they all ignored this issue.
Yeah, we had a paper trail before Linda Kennedy, a teacher, and I did the podcast. The paper trail went the entire length of the house, and it had all the letters we wrote, all the history. And not only did it show who ignored the child safeguarding issue, like the Children's Ombudsman, because they said the books haven't harmed children yet, or the Garda or the libraries, but we exposed who's behind it, who's funding it, our public funds are funding it, but who's allocating funds to this. So we did a deep dive. It's on our YouTube channel. We can post the link in the description here, but it really exposes I'm going to call them criminals behind harming our children.
So there's a lot of gaslighting going on this one. It's far right activism, people wanting to censor library books, all this kind of discussion. We don't want to censor books. We just want the books put in the appropriate section of the library and accessible to the appropriate age groups.
Mm-hmm.
And these books are not appropriate for 12 to 17-year-olds. That's the issue. SPHE is a vehicle for social engineering, there's no doubt about that. But so is this other subject called CSPE, or Civic, Social and Political Education. And this is a copy. We'll put a link in the description to the actual curriculum content for the junior cycle. And you can see there rights and responsibilities, global citizenship, and exploring democracy. We have a couple of images here from the current book that talks about things like Black Lives Matter, which is a radical Marxist group involved in violent activism. Like if that was a far right group or a right wing group, it would be described as violent far right.
Absolutely.
Well, it's violent far left. That's what it is. These are violent Marxists. It's not something to be supporting and taking the knee for. And that's not being racist saying that. This is a political activist group. And to be honest, it has other ambitions which are not related to racism. So
absolutely. To jump in there, Eugene, Senator Ronan Mullen talked about the climate alarmism being part of the school curriculum, and it's making children absolutely feeling anxious and terrified. And if we look at on chapter 7, the green sustainable living, it talks about the bees, which yes, the bees are important. It talks about plastic. Yes, we should reduce the use of that. I don't disagree. Everybody wants to keep our oceans, our water and our air clean. Pollution is one thing, and we all should be responsible to keep the world clean. But this climate alarmism slipping in there, making people think the Earth's going to blow up and that the climate change, which climate has always changed, that it's a man-made crisis and we should have activism. And we saw those children, remember, fighting against the oil, throwing tomato soup on pieces of art in the museum. We covered that once. That's what it's teaching children, to be social justice warriors and fear the Earth is going to blow up, and teaching them misinformation about the climate. It's misinformation.
I think a general point is in the curriculum now, they're not teaching critical thinking in the classical sense of critical thinking. Looking at something objectively, weighing up the arguments, looking at the facts and discovering the facts and validating those facts, etc. they're teaching a different critical approach, which is a Marxist critical approach,
Yes, yep.
which is alarmist
And
and,
if they really,
inspires activism.
were concerned, sorry to jump in, if they really were concerned about poverty and sustainability, why wouldn't they teach children how to be self-sufficient, how to grow their own food, how to not rely on the government, but become self-sufficient citizens?
Correct.
Why aren't they including that? Because that's not really what the type of sustainable they're talking about.
There's a political agenda behind these curricula, unfortunately. So we've got an article here talking about the dumbing down concerns. And it's coming from teachers. It's coming even from the teachers' unions. And it's raising, concerns over what's happened in the curriculum. There's other things happening as well. We've seen it with the grades being inflated for the Leaving Cert. This equity is being applied to our schools now. 40% of the grades now coming from kind of student research projects. There's a concern here that the standards of our education are being eroded. And people would say, oh, it's in the interest of equity.
If everybody's equal, nobody's special, nobody tries harder because there's no tiering. And let's face it, in life, tiering is okay. It's okay to say, and I say to my children, someone's going to run faster than you, but you might be a better swimmer. That's okay. Everyone has their unique talents.
Exactly.
Everybody should be the best they can be. And competition in a friendly way is healthy.
It is. Equity is communism, where everybody gets the same outcome, regardless of ability or what you put into or effort that you put into it. That's communism. We shouldn't be bringing that into our schools.
No.
Or our institutions or anything else. This one teacher here on the ASTI, Central Executive Council, calling out concerns over subject matter getting dumbed down and not having the challenges it used to have. And that's a concern. This is an issue which kind of came up towards the end of last year because we kind of investigated who was responsible for signing off on the textbooks that are used in the classroom. The answer is nobody.
It's a finger-pointing exercise, isn't it? A retired principal in our group, Anne, wrote a letter and confirmed there's no sign-off. So was it someone's concerned about a book? Let's say I'm concerned about a book. I go to Department of Education. Norma Foley says, oh, it's the NCCA. You go to the NCCA and they say, it's the publisher. So every parent has to start contacting the publisher because there's no consistent sign-off process. You couldn't make it up.
No, this is crazy. So you've got a curriculum, it gets translated into a book, and somebody needs to validate that that book is fit for purpose. It doesn't have other stuff in it. It hasn't adjusted what's been presented in some ways, presenting in some inappropriate way. That's not happening. There's no formal review and no formal accreditation for these books. This needs to change. The SPHE books are books that never come home, right? If you're to see them as a parent, you're going to have to purchase one of them. You'd have to find out from your school which books are they using, and then you're going to have to purchase them yourself. They're 20 to 30 euro, and the book kind of does for the year. As I say, opt-outs are going to become challenging. Opt-outs are obviously one of the first courses of action.
Another option, though, Eugene, is a parent has every right to ask the school for the material their child is seeing. So perhaps every parent could say to the principal, it's my freedom of getting this information to see all the books that my children have access to. I want my child to bring them home, and the parent can get access to the books if they wish to try that route first. And then that's another bonus, letting the principal know we want to see what's happening.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think there's perhaps even another way, because most of these books are actually available in electronic format. I think there should be a mechanism for parents to have access to the book electronically and to be able to review it online, for example. I think that's something that should happen. We went through in detail on the draft primary curriculum. These are some of the must-haves: parental visibility and transparency. There should be no secrecy pacts for the primary curriculum at all. And then we talked about the access to the books. Right now, the curriculum definition is lacking, and that needs to be addressed. This whole issue of age appropriateness and radicalization, anything like that in the curriculum needs to come out. So again, you're talking about a very young age cohort. And then we've got this cross-curriculum activity, or contamination, as I call it. That needs to come out. If you're doing maths, you need to be doing mathematics, not mathematics with queer theory, not mathematics, racial mathematics, or some other thing brought into your mathematics. That's the same for all the subjects. And then this fact-based knowledge, things should be focused on that and not politics and activism. Again, there's a contamination of our subjects because of this.
The primary school submission that we submitted to the NCCA, it's on the naturalwomenscouncil.ie website under our submissions, and you can see the submission that we did. And Eugene, I know you led the group of teachers and parents on that, which was hundreds of hours going through the pages and pages of material to come up with that submission, and we encourage all parents to do that as well. So it's on our website.
And we went through the background research documents as well as the actual curriculum documents.
And teachers attended focus groups as well to give their verbal feedback in a focus group and get more context around it. So it was a really heavy piece of work, very fact-based, evidence-based. In our submission, you can find on the Natural Women's Council website.
Yeah. One of the problems we have right now is that the academic theory on education right now is heavily activism-based. It's heavily social justice based. And it's been like that for probably 10 to 20 years. It's not appropriate, actually. And unfortunately, when people go to look at, what's the latest theory, what's the latest research on, teaching in secondary schools or primary schools, if they take the stuff off the shelf, that's what they're going to get right now. This is the reason there's an issue. Kind of what we need to call time on is say, no, that material is not appropriate. It may be the latest academic research, but it's still not appropriate. Discussion for another day. We've covered it in some other videos and we'll cover it more again. And it kind of brings me to the point, this last point here, this appropriate pedagogical approach. So pedagogical approach is the way you teach the subjects, the approach to teaching in the classroom. One of the approaches being used, one of the persons very heavily cited is a Marxist called Paulo Freire, is a Marxist educator from Brazil. And he had a dialogical method based on generative themes of teaching. Well, it was one of his modes of teaching. Now, you could argue whether you were actually learning anything, but you'd be talking about a generative theme. So a generative theme could be trans people. It could be climate change. And you start talking about that in the classroom and children start sharing their lived experience. Because they start sharing their lived experience, they're sharing something that's of a personal nature. Hence, there's a contract and a secrecy pact behind that. So it can't be repeated outside of the classroom. So this whole discussion, which could have been on social transitioning, your gender or climate or whatever it is, parents will not be aware that that conversation took place. And that conversation could have taken place in an English class or a maths class or a history class. This is the issue with the whole cross curriculum, and it's the issue with the pedagogical approaches that have been taken. A parent looks at the curriculum, they won't see any reference to perhaps what was discussed, the generative theme that was discussed. They won't see it. It won't appear in the curriculum, but it will have been discussed in the classroom, and people would have been talking about stuff which could have been quite a sensitive nature. So that's an issue. That's a concern. So you really can't be adopting a pedagogical approaches that do that, because you are subverting parental rights in doing that. And then the last thing, you have to depoliticize the curriculum. So bringing identity politics into the curriculum and bringing things that are not age appropriate, that violate child safeguarding. We've gone through the WHO and UNESCO standards, Jana, and they don't meet the requirements. They just don't. And so quoting them and saying, oh, well, we're following these standards, everything should be okay, or doing what the United Nations are telling us to do. It's not okay, because what they're quoting is not good.
No.
We shouldn't be following that. We need to stand up and say, we here in Ireland, we're not going to follow something just because the United Nations say it. We'll apply our own critical thinking to it, and we'll say, that's not fit for purpose, that's not age appropriate, and we're not going to use it.
The message I have for all of our public reps, our teachers and our principals is start being critical thinkers, not order takers.
Correct. Exactly. And we should be pushing back. We should be calling things out when we see that they're not fit for purpose, or people are imposing things on this country, be it the United Nations or the EU or whoever, and call them out and say, we're not going to accept that. I'm sorry. We're here to represent the Irish people. The problem is this whole globalist notion at the moment. We're all global citizens now. We have to follow the line globally. I think there's an issue there. That's the problem. So other concerns on that same point, and these were raised by Grip Media at the time and by David Quinn at the time of the draft curriculum for the primary curriculum. This whole notion of any sense of Irish identity was being erased in favour of a global identity, of being a global citizen. If you're a child growing up in Ireland, you need to understand your heritage. And if you're a migrant living in Ireland and now growing up, and your child is growing up in Ireland, they need to understand what it is to be Irish. But this has been eroded. It's been seen as a far-right construct, that you're being nationalistic, or any notion of sovereignty now is considered as something that's far-right. This is a problem. Irish people need to stand up and say, I'm happy to be Irish. I think my child should learn what it means to be Irish in the classroom. And that applies to any child in this country who's undergoing our education system.
And
as it
how
would in
did
any
how
other.
did we even get to a place where patriotism and nationalism is perceived or labeled as racist? I
Far
just
right.
came back from the USA and I saw USA flags on every house, hanging out of car windows, on shirts. There's nothing wrong with being patriotic to your country. You know, my kids were born in Ireland and I'm proud to have them learn Irish history and hang an Irish flag. That is not racist. That is patriotic.
Well, let's talk about what's next, Jana. I guess we need to give people what's coming. So EJA are the teacher training. They're a relatively new group that's been formed to do teacher training, and they're looking to enforce the agenda in schools. They're looking to enforce what teachers are teaching, the use of pronouns and gender neutral language, and enforce the curriculum. And they're underway with that. So that's EJA. So that's going to be happening. So you're going to see schools are going to feel the pressure on that. Teachers are going to feel the pressure from this group. So we have anti-bullying and critical race theory. So Canaltas is the anti-bullying program that kicked off last year. It's going to roll out to all schools. And then critical race theory, the view right now is that racism is systemic in Ireland. All Irish children have white privilege and they need to acknowledge their white privilege and be anti-racist. So this is another Marxist program that's going to be rolled out into the schools during the school year. Senior cycle SPHE, that's been delayed, which maybe is good news to people. There was a lot of feedback. I personally get feedback on this. All our groups get feedback on this. Do hear that there's probably that feedback did have an effect on the NCCA. The level of, I suppose, strength of that feedback was such that this has been delayed until 2025, 2026. So we won't see an updated SPHE this year.
On the naturalwomenscouncil.ie website, you can see our senior cycle submission to the NCCA. So let's just hope that the power of the public pushback from all of our supporters, all the parents out there, all the other great groups who are doing some fantastic work made a difference, because they delayed it, but they didn't really publicly delay it. They went out very quietly and we found out they delayed it, but they didn't announce it really publicly that it was delayed.
So the next one is the primary curriculum, which is due to roll out in 2025, 2026. I guess, again, we've published our feedback on the website. And right now, we believe that the curriculum is not fit for purpose and should not proceed. I would describe it as being at a level of political indoctrination and brainwashing at a level we've never seen before in Irish education. It's bringing in something that you would have only seen in communist countries.
These are the youngest, most vulnerable, impressionable, age 5. They believe anything their teacher will tell them.
And that's why they want to focus on the primary curriculum. Yes. You see, that's why they want to get them young. I don't know what's happened in this country that we've ended up bringing in indoctrination into our schools like this. That we've become a communist country, some sort of totalitarian communist country by the looks of things, which is just an awful reflection on our government. So Irish people just need to wake up. And our universities, I just need a bottom point here. Our universities, we don't really talk about it because it's not a focus of this group or of our group, but they're totally consumed with radical leftist critical social justice right now. The impact that's having on our students, the impact that's going to have on scholarship over time, and ultimately on the reputation of Ireland. Probably hasn't affected things like the engineering disciplines, the sciences as much, but it is affecting them. You cannot go to university now but to be impacted by this thing. So there's a huge problem. Like, it's the same problem that's in all other countries, Western countries. We're suffering from the same malaise. And just to make that point, so if you have children going to university, and if they're going to the arts or humanities in particular, you really need to watch out, because your children are going to get the whole woke agenda, social justice agenda in the neck from the minute they step into the university gate to the minute they leave. They're going to get it all the time as part of their course.
When I went to a GenSpect conference in 2023, I believe it was, down in Killarney, we talked about how to bulletproof your kids against this ideology. And I think that there were two things that were sort of given as advice by one of the attendees in the conference. Is one, the fact that we're awake to this and are having conversations with our own children, and they have strong roots and they know right from wrong and fact from fiction. That's a start. But also teaching your children to be critical thinkers. So the best thing we can do as parents to protect our children from these ideologies is teach them from a young age, question what doesn't make sense. I always say, if someone says there's a pig flying across the sky or a man can become a woman, your child should say, that's nonsense. That's not real. So teach your children to be critical thinkers. That's a great start in protecting them.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting ahead, as I said, unfortunately, you may have to purchase the books right now for SPHE, but I think it's a worthwhile investment, and talk your children through them and, say, well, that doesn't make sense now, and so your children they go in and they've basically been inoculated against what they're going to get exposed to in the school. They may have a hard time because of that. But if all parents do that, they won't have a hard time because they'll have other children in the same classroom who are the same and who would be not afraid to speak up as well.
We want to stop this, and we want to protect children in the public school system. The time for the silent majority to stop being silent is now.
In fairness to Ireland, there's an awful lot of good teachers out there, an awful lot of good schools trying to do the right thing. They're obviously get influenced by EJA and the department. I don't think we're beyond recovery at this stage. Now, our universities might be a little bit different, but I think our school system is still pretty healthy. Another 4 or 5 years of this, and it won't be healthy.
No.
If this continues at the current trajectory, because it's happening very fast as well, in 5 years' time, our school system will be in rag order, and we'll have the victims of it coming out and going into university. We'll have children who are in bad shape as well. People do need to start speaking up now.
It will take an entire generation to clean up this mess.
We have a video which talks about part 5 of our corruption of the Irish education, actually walks through the detail. We've covered some of it in this video, but this goes through like a page by page of some of the books and what children will be exposed to. That goes through the masturbation, the class contracts, all of that. So it's about an hour long. It's a long watch, but it has to be because we need to go through we do go through the actual books, textbooks and presentations and the library books. And then we've got again a long video. It's an hour long on the draft primary curriculum. Again, it goes through the underpinnings, the research, and our concerns. Some people have given feedback that we're very negative about it, but we've done our homework, and everything I've seen that we propose to do in that, I'm seeing in reality. I've seen it in the research for the SPHE, that course that was done in DCU. So everything, I can assure you, everything we bring up in those videos on the draft primary curriculum is well grounded. Now, people mightn't understand some of the terminology, and apologies for that, because we're conscious people wouldn't be up to speed on critical pedagogy or queer theory and things like that. So I think there is an education that people need to know. But once you get that education, you'll understand where we were coming from.
The corruption of Irish education, that is on the naturalwomen'scouncil.ie website at the banner on the top, or you can find it on our YouTube channel. First one shows, the roots of where this is actually coming from the very top, going back to the Frankfurt School. Very disturbing. Viewer discretion is recommended, but I would highly encourage everyone to watch that 6-part series and really look at the sinister, dark roots. It's disturbing. It really should frighten every parent and anger every parent.
Yeah, we do need to do a 7th episode, which would cover the CSPE curriculum. That's one thing we haven't covered. So that's it, Jana.
Thanks everyone for watching today. And please, on the YouTube video, if you can, be sure to like the video, do a quick comment, give us your feedback, anything else you'd like to see as well. And be sure to share it with every parent and teacher that you know. And also subscribe, and this will help us beat those algorithms, because as we expose this and speak the truth, we are subject to shadow banning. So please like, comment, subscribe, and share out this video. Thanks everyone. And we'll be doing part 2 this week, which will be exposing some of the third parties that are coming into your children's schools. So watch that space for this one later this week.